Hello, I'm Sandra Rose, and I'm delighted to have an opportunity to share my story called A Glimpse of Heaven. Now, many of us wonder about heaven. Is it real? Is God real? What does it feel like to die? How do we get to heaven? When do we get to heaven? Who will we see there? All of these different questions. Well, one thing we all know is everyone does die, but some die and come back and share their stories from the other side. Well, I'm one of those. Fortunately, I've had the opportunity to see heaven, and I've had at least 4 NDEs. I want to just talk to you about 2 today, the 2 that I think are certainly the most important to me. The first one was in 1952, and I was just 7 years old. And back in 52 in America, there was a polio epidemic, and thousands of people died from polio. It was killer. They called it infantile paralysis back in those days, and it killed children. And I remember being paralyzed and being very sick at home and being taken to the emergency room. And I remember being put on a stretcher, and they started pushing me down the hall so fast that the lights went zip, 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 zip. And then they stopped, and a doctor got on my chest and opened my throat, and he did a tracheotomy because I wasn't able to breathe. My breathing muscles were paralyzed, as were all of my other muscles in my body. So he opened up an airway. They gave me an artificial airway until they could get me upstairs and put me into an iron lung. And the iron lung did the breathing for me. So that was an experience and a half. We started out I went to the hospital on Saturday. On Monday, there were 10 of us there. And on Friday, I was the only one still alive. The other 9 children had died. And that afternoon, I died. My mother talked to me, told me what it was like to sit there and watch me die. They turned off the iron lung, and I lost my color, but she sat there for quite a while with me. And she was just, thinking about losing her little girl. And all of a sudden, she heard this clunk noise, and she looked in the portholes, and the iron lung has portholes like a submarine. And I was kicking the side of the iron lung. I came back. Now, that was a little girl, and I don't remember a whole lot about it, except that I remember what it was like to be in the iron lung and what it was like to learn to walk and talk all over. But I am blessed. I was allowed the privilege of having a second visit to heaven and really remembering all of that. The first was polio, but the second was in 1976. I was a lady with female problems back then in my late 30s. I had a tumor the size of a walnut that we were watching, no big deal. And all of a sudden, it grew to the size of a cantaloupe in 3 weeks' time. So the doctor said, well, we need to hysterectomy. You're young. That's fine. I have my 3 children, my twins, Eric and Katrina and Bob, my single. I'm fine. Get rid of this precancerous condition, having all of these biopsies all the time. That was awful. So the nurse, we did it. I felt great. The nurse said, let's go for a walk. I thought, good. I'm up walking. It feels really good. But remember, I was open all the way up my tummy. So my tummy was really sore. So walking is more like waddling. I was waddling down the hall, but I was moving, and the nurse grabbed me by the shoulders. And I remember feeling searing pain when she pulled me back. That hurt. Well, I got back to my bed. I remember crawling in my bed. Oh, thank goodness I'm back in my bed. And I went into a blissful sleep. Now, I know it was daylight because the room was light when I went to bed. Well, when I woke up, it was dark. And I thought, oh gosh, I've wet the bed. I felt wet. I was cold. I was wet. I thought, oh goodness gracious, I've wet the bed. I didn't know what to do. I reached over to get the call button. I was on an old-fashioned rigid IV board, so I couldn't reach my call button on the wrong side. So I said to my roommate, please turn on the light and call a nurse. Well, all I heard were her screams and my screams. I was bleeding out. The blood was coming up so badly that it was saturating the blankets across my chest and abdomen. And I remember just very gently rising up above my body, and this is interesting. That's me down there, and that's me up here. And oh, look at what they're doing down there. They're all fussing over my body and trying to do what they're trying to do for me. And that's interesting. I didn't feel any pain anymore. I didn't hurt. And I was just floating up here and above, watching all that was going on. And I knew that was me, but I really didn't feel any relationship to me here and me down there. But I just knew I didn't hurt, and that felt really good. And I was just watching all the commotion going on. And then all of a sudden, I turned a little bit and looked up, and the whole ceiling of the room opened up, and it was sky. And through no effort of my own, I remember just gently going up through that opening in the ceiling. And it's like having a small aircraft flying relatively low. Oh, there's the hospital. I'm above the hospital. We're at Glens Falls. So there's Glens Falls. There's a falls down there. And I can see my house over in Queensbury. Now, this is really neat. It's like being your own private little airplane floating around up there. And then all of a sudden I was in the clouds, like you're in a jet plane, and you see these fluffy white clouds up there. I thought, oh, this is really neat. I thought it was so exciting to be doing this. I had no pain at all and no fear at all either. And then all of a sudden I go faster and faster and faster. faster. It was stars. I know people talk about seeing tunnels and voids. I went through stars. And how I think about it is on the old TV show Star Trek, the Starship Enterprise would go through the star field's warp speed. I was just zipping through stars. And I don't know how long I went. I don't know how far I went, but after a while I started to deaccelerate, slow down just a little bit. And ahead of me, I could see light coming from the horizon over there. And as I got closer, I could see this beautiful city it just diamond. It's just beautiful. It just glistened. And as I got closer and closer, I noticed that there was gardens around the outside and a big wall that seemed to go all around forever. And as I got down and closer, I kind of landed in the garden. I realized that there was somebody there by the doorway. Now, it wasn't a door, it was a gateway. It didn't have a gate, but it was an archway. It was beautiful with columns, and it opened up. And I remember saying, oh my gosh, it's my grandpa. Now, we always wonder, who are we going to see when we get to heaven? I figured my brother Billy, he was killed at 17 in a train wreck. And I had felt him on occasion. Other people felt Billy. He has a playful spirit. Or my former husband, Mark. Or maybe my mom and dad. But then again, it made sense afterward, after all these years. Well, I looked at my grandpa, and he died relatively young, and he was still young, but he had 2 legs. When he died, he had a circulatory problem, and they had to remove one of his legs. And you're going to remove the second leg, and he just could not deal with that, so he passed away. I never had a chance to tell him goodbye, and I always felt badly about that, not having a chance to say goodbye to Grandpa. He was very special to me, and I'm glad that he was there. And I never felt afraid at all. So he said, let's go inside now. So we went through from this one garden into a courtyard, massive space, and a colonnade that went on forever, just beautiful, beautiful ornate columns forever and ever. And to the left was another garden, and there was trees and flowers of every color. And I couldn't get over how even the leaves of the trees seemed to sparkle. Everything was so alive and so vibrant. Here on earth, our colors are dull by comparison to the colors in heaven. Those flowers were beautiful, and we do not have words to describe how beautiful they are. And the trees and the fragrances of the flowers, they all blended like a perfume. It was just lovely. And I wanted to touch everything. And I talked to my grandfather for a while. I thanked him for all the things that he had done for me. He said, Sandra, we need to go on now. And I really didn't want to go anywhere. I wanted to stay there. I was so happy with him. And this place is just so beautiful. And I could see the spires of the buildings on the other side of the next courtyard. And I could see that this colonnade went. And I wanted to go down there and see what was down there. I could hear music. I didn't hear voices, but I heard beautiful music, and I liked music. I wanted to go see what the music was, and I was just excited to take this all in. I wanted to say. And he said, Sandy, you have to come with me now. So we walked through this courtyard into another courtyard. And then he took me to a building entranceway, and he said, no, I have to leave you here. Oh, I didn't want to do that. I was afraid. This is heaven, but this is my grandpa, and I don't know what's in there or who's in there or anything like that. And I could see through the doorway. It was a very bright room, light colored. The walls, too, everything had relief on them. They were beautiful. They were not plain. There's nothing plain about these beautiful walls and these beautiful buildings. They're quite ornate. And I remember stepping into this room, and I heard the words, Sandra, come up here. Do not be afraid. Well, I was afraid because in the middle of the room was this beautiful table and an entity that just sparkled, just glowed. And I really think, I'm imagining that must be God in a way that I wouldn't be afraid of him, because I'm sure God is far more than we can ever imagine on our little brains, because he created all these beautiful things. But he said, come here, do not be afraid. Well, once he said that the second time, I wasn't afraid. And he kind of looked at me for a while, like he was thinking about what's he going to do with me. And I thought, oh, it's like standing in front of the teacher getting a report card type of thing. And oh dear, what have I done? And I knew that I had made mistakes, and I was really a little bit nervous that he wouldn't let me stay. He said, you can stay, but I gave you a second life. Remember, I had polio and I died. He gave me a second life. This is my second life. And he said, what of value have you done with that life, Sandra? Have you made a difference in anyone's lives? Well, I thought I was a good mother. I was a Sunday school teacher. But have I really made a difference? No. I've always felt guilty for what had happened to me, so I didn't. I said, I'm so sorry. No, I didn't make a difference. But I promise you, if you let me go back, I will make a difference for you. And zip, I was back in my body. Oh, I hurt. Oh, I hurt. But I got over it. I divorced my husband. I went on with my life. But I kept thinking, why? Why did I get to go to heaven? Because there's something very important I need to tell you. 2 years prior to that, I had a relationship with a person who I really loved. And I thought he loved me. He had given me vacations and trips to the theater and dinner out, fun things. He made me feel beautiful and desired and desirable. And I didn't feel that way in my marriage. And I felt really wonderful with this man named Carl. So we were supposed to be married on Valentine's Day that next year. Well, this is Christmas Eve, and he was coming down to bring us gifts and spend Christmas Eve with my 3 children and I. And Eric and Katrina were like young teens, and Bobby was maybe 12. And I was so excited because I had a special treat to tell him. And he said, I have something special to say to you. And I thought, I do too, because I was pregnant with his baby. Now, my family had disowned me for loving this man and had no idea about the baby, but for loving this man. But I thought he would be happy because he had been married before and he was divorced and his children were adopted. And I thought that our baby would be a little bit early, but would still be loved because we loved each other and we loved the child, I thought. So he went in and he gave the kids their presents and me my presents. But we need to talk. I go, yeah, I have something special for you too. And we went into the dining room. He sat down. He goes, Sandra. When he says Sandra, I know it's not Sandy, so something serious is going to happen, right? He goes, I like you. Like me. I love you. Yeah. But I don't think I can be the father of teenagers again. I just can't do it. Now, my kids were good kids, I thought. He said, no, I think we have to stop seeing each other right now. So it's been nice knowing you, but goodbye. Can you only imagine how I felt? I sat there as though I had been hit in the belly with a cannonball. I felt stupid. Every bad word you can think of. Dirty, stupid, abandoned, lost. I went back to my kids. I put them to bed and I kept the smiling face on, and it was Christmas. It was everyone there Christmas. And I got them to bed and I went into my room, and forget Kleenexes. They don't work. I had a washcloth because I was crying alligator tears. I have never, ever felt so lost in my life, and never in a low spot like this. And it was such a low spot. I really didn't think I could live. I did a very stupid thing. I took an intentional overdose of pills that should have killed me. But the next morning I woke up, I wasn't dead, but my baby was. I miscarried that baby the morning after Christmas morning. And I lived, and I had to live with that guilt for a long, long time. Well, I started thinking about things. I've got to get my life together because I made a promise to God. And I told him that I would do something. I would do something special. And I didn't know what to do. I started to study the Bible more, went to women's groups. I went to retreats. I like retreats because I can really get lost in them. Sometimes I need to just get lost in them and learning things. So this retreat that I went to was a little bit different. It was one that actually had 20 members of the same church. 20 of us were from the same church, including my pastor and his wife. And we were not the facilitators. We were the attendees. And it was Easter weekend. And the title for this retreat was, Who is God? Is he real? And what does he mean to you? It's interesting. I know who God is. He's in my life every day. Is he real? Absolutely. I thought, I'm going to enjoy sharing with this, I thought. The leader goes, this is a silent retreat. There'll be no conversation now, that's 9 p.m., until 8 p.m. the next morning. Not between husbands and wives, no conversation whatsoever. They gave us our tablets, our list of questions, and our pens, and said, go to it. Well, I thought, this is going to be easy. I know how I feel. I can write about this. I know how I feel. So I walked out into the main room, sat next to this beautiful fireplace. It was rainy out and damp and cold outside. And I was busy getting my kids off to see their dads. I had no rain gear with me, no rain gear at all. And I remember sitting there thinking, well, this is okay. Let's start to read the question. They started looking at the question. They started moving around in the chair like this. And I started to twist my hands like this. I thought, what is the matter with you? Why are you getting so upset over what? What's the matter with you? And when I get frightened or I get hurt, I run. And for some reason, I was terrified to be there. I don't know why. And I sat there and I got antsier and antsier. I didn't have a coat on. I got up and I threw down my tablet and I ran out through those double doors. I knocked open those double doors and I ran outside into the rain. Lickety-split. Whoa, there I go. And as I was running, there's a circular driveway. In the middle of it was our trees, and it was raining, and it was very misty, and the clouds were hanging low because it's the Adirondack Mountains, so it was very cloudy out there. I remember seeing my friends, and all of a sudden I stopped. What am I doing? Where am I? What is going on? And I just went like this. I was so lost. Dear God, why? Why am I here? Why? And I opened my eyes and I go, around me was the most beautiful, soft light, as though I was wrapped in a beautiful, soft blanket. And I wasn't afraid, and I didn't feel any pain, and I was free and happier than I've ever been in my life, with this wonderful feeling of love. And I wasn't getting rained on, and I could see my friends in the peripheral, and they were looking at me and watching me. And I held on to that feeling because it's unbelievable. I've never imagined anything like this would ever happen to me. I've only read about it, and it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't want to let go of that feeling, but I knew I had to go back in. But I waited just a minute, and I heard him say, Sandra, this is exactly where you're supposed to be. This is the beginning. This is exactly where you're supposed to be. It's okay. And with that message, I was whole and alive and happy. I went back to the bunk room, and I didn't get wet either, going back in either. And remember, it's a silent retreat until 8 o'clock the next morning. I went to bed. I had the best night's rest I can remember ever having that night, because I just felt God's love. I felt warm. I felt loved. I felt protected. I felt everything I needed to feel. Well, the next morning, I thought, maybe I dreamt this, because this was just so magical. It can't be real, right? So I said to Clayton, my pastor, he'd tell me the truth, right? What did you see? He said, Sandy, you were in a light and you glowed. I said, Shirley, did you see anything? She said, Sandy, you were in a light. Sam, Ruth, all of my friends. I said, did you hear anything? No, just the rain. They didn't hear God's voice, but they saw the light. And I told them what God had told me. Now, Clayton does not usually share his pulpit very often. And the next Sunday was Easter Sunday. And he said, Sandy, would you please tell our congregation what happened here this weekend? And that was the first time I ever talked about the NDE. And I'm grateful to have had that opportunity. So then I knew I had to really keep going. So I started to get some more counseling. I had to deal with the anger at myself for the baby's death, and anger for being in a bad marriage and in a bad relationship with Carl. And I had a lot of garbage to take care of. So I started seeing a psychiatrist, and I felt good about that. And being a personality, it takes a strong person to kind of calm me down. And Dr. Bryans knew how to do that. Well, this is one session. We've been together for quite a while, the group of 10 of us. And he said, now tonight we're going to do something different. You have to imagine yourself as an inanimate object. Now, to be an inanimate object is like a clock or a table or a chair. I'm a person, so I didn't say anything. And one girl said she's a lion. That's not my home. She's a tiger. They all had something that was alive and usually fierce. I'm a pussycat, if anything, but I'm not any cat. And then I said, dear God, what am I? And oh my gosh, the words came out of my mouth. I am a beautiful Tiffany lamp, valuable but broken into 1,000 pieces. I can be made new again, but I'll never be the same, but I can still be better and be valuable. And that was really the beginning of my getting to where I am today. On May of 22, it all came together. I fell at home for whatever reason. We don't quite know why I was passing out. I'd had surgery on my back the autumn before. I started to fall backwards, and I realized that I had to stop myself. I'd had lumbar surgery that September before, and this is May. So I reached behind myself and went down. My head hit the glass edge of the door, clunk, clunk, and I landed on my wrists behind my lumbar region. Well, my husband heard me scream. I could not move. I had really broken both of my wrists, injured vertebra in my neck, and 2 spinal fractures. So needless to say, it took a rock to hit me over the head to slow me down to listen, because before being a personality, I'm always trying to figure out, what does God want me to do? And this time I realized, sitting there with my arms in casts like this, saying, dear God, please, I'm still here. I'm missing something somewhere. I'm not getting it right. Please, what do you want of me? What do you need from me? And all of a sudden I got the words, and I said to my husband, grab a tablet. And this is what God told me. You will get well. You will get up, and you will tell your story, but the whole story, the good and the bad. It's important that people know the whole story to understand it all. And one thing led to another, and I met a science group who study near-death experiences, and I've done my first conversation with them last February. And as I was standing up doing my little talk to them and talking about everything that I've told you now, all of a sudden I went off my script, my bullet list, and started to talk about how to heal a broken heart. And this is the last thing that God has asked me to do, in addition to my other things that I talk about. We all have broken hearts. We all have pain of one kind or another. And I'm different than anybody else, but maybe I dealt with it in a way differently. So I tell my audience to picture their hearts, and I actually give them hearts when they are in a live audience. I give them little hearts like this, and to hold it against their chest, because your heart is broken like this. This is what our heart looks like when it's broken. And I tell them to hold that little heart against their heart. Now picture your heart like an advent calendar box with all those little doors on it with little shiny brass doorknobs. Now, when you start to open up the pain in your heart, go for a little door because you don't want to handle the big things right away. Be gentle on yourself. So open a door. Maybe Aunt Bessie was mean to me one day, or maybe so-and-so as a kid was mean to me. Take that out, throw that away, deal with it, and put back something. Maybe Aunt Bessie wasn't really that bad all the time once she was nice to me. So put that back in there, put some sunshine in there, and close the door. Now go to the next door. And when you get brave enough, go to the big door. What happened? An issue with your mom, your dad, our family. We all have family issues that are painful. One at a time. But if you do them one at a time, be gentle to yourself. Pretty soon you realize, oh my gosh, I've healed my heart and I can breathe. I don't have the weight of my heart. My shoulders are back. I've healed my heart. So, we are given a gift. The gift is life, and we need to live it. Death is not the end of life. It's just the beginning of a new life. So I hope that what I've said to you today has been helpful to you. I welcome questions. I welcome comments. I just feel truly blessed to have been asked by our God to be a messenger of this, and I hope that you have found it worthwhile. Thank you so much for listening.
If you like this story, be sure to support The Other Side NDE by checking out our brand new book below,